Myoho Renge Kyo. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thank you for your practice. Continuing in our podcast making of terms of the Buddhist Reference book. Today I'm going to do two entries, both on Gandhara, so I figure I'll put them together. The Gandhari language and the Gandharan Buddhist texts. And then, probably won't get to it today, but Gohanzon. What is the deal with that word? How it is often misinterpreted, misused, mispromoted, mispropagated. A lot to go over when we get to that one. But first, Gandhara. Talked a lot about Gandhara in recent years because recent discoveries were made there in the last 20, 30 years of texts that have been translated and captured in many different languages in this area of scholarship of northeastern India, which is now Pakistan and Afghanistan, and I don't even know if India has any part of that territory anymore, but yeah, we talked about that last time. So the Gandhari language, they had their own language there. Well, no surprise, India has to this day I think over 125 national languages. I mean, languages that if you went from, for instance, different states in the United States, nobody would understand each other between states. The language is that different, that singular. It boggles the mind, right? Big country, though, a lot of people. Might help if I put my auxiliary eyes on. Gandhari is a Prakrit language. Interestingly enough, that is the language that Shakyamuni used to orate, to teach. He never wrote any of his teachings down. He taught them all orally, and as you know, all of the teachings have gathas, right? Repetitions, almost a verse, they're often called, right? Because it's much easier to memorize a teaching that way, or anything that way. Ask yourself how many songs you know by repeating, memorizing, singing in your car, and so on and so forth. Same thing with the teachings. Prakrit was a language that was accessible to any of these ancient Indian cultures. It was more universal, kind of the language of trade and communication amongst a wide swath of India, yeah? And Gandhari is one of the Prakrit languages. Interesting, right? Found mainly in texts dated between the 3rd century BCE and the 4th century CE. So Catholics really won out on the calendar, didn't they? So 3rd century before the Christian era, and 4th century, the Common Era after. So 3rd century BCE, that's only 100 to 200 years after Shakyamuni. Interesting to note, because these texts are captured oral teachings of Shakyamuni. Now, some schools of Buddhism, some sects, will argue, that didn't happen for, centuries and centuries. Others will say, well, no, there's a record of people getting together and so forth, translating this in Ananda's lifetime, right? Because Ananda is the speaker who memorized so well all of these teachings and they started writing down even in his lifetime. But it's only important if you understand the recent findings in the Gandhara region of various translations in Gandhari language, Prakrit, of these oral teachings, captured, folded up by either hired scribes or other authors writing down these memorized teachings in Prakrit language, and Gandhari, also in Sanskrit and Pali and in Chinese, even dialects of the whole region, folding them up. Oh my goodness, they folded them up. Put them in clay pots and buried them in the ground. Why? Because Buddhism has consistently, in Shakyamuni's lifetime, been in danger of being a lost teaching, right? The onus on the practitioners, the students, to keep this teaching alive. Well, that continues right through to Nichiren, doesn't it? And our efforts today of propagation are along the same lines. We don't want these teachings, these correct teachings, to be lost to time. So, mainly in texts dated between the 3rd century BCE and the 4th century CE in the region of Gandhara, in the northwest of the Indian subcontinent. Northwest, I thought it was northeast. I'll have to check. The language was heavily used by the former Buddhist cultures of Central Asia and has been found as far away as eastern China in inscriptions at Luoyang and Anyang. So you see how these transcriptions were used to spread Buddhism from this locale, right? Charles Williman states, and this is a quote, Gandhari, the language or languages of the Gandharan cultural area, including Gandhara, Bactria, and Khotan, was the language used by the Buddhist schools in that area, such as the Sarvastivada, the Mahasamgika, the Dharmaguptaka, and so on. And you may recognize some of that going into the scholarship of Nagarjuna. It is also the language from which most Chinese translations before the time of Kumarajiva, 350 to 409 or 413, derive. It is the Buddhist literature of the Gandhara region that was introduced to China during the 1st century BCE through at least the 4th century CE. So, very, very important region of Buddhist scholarship, right? And only recently discovered. Gandhari appears on coins, inscriptions, and texts, and notably the Gandharan Buddhist texts, which leads us right into the next section, term, the Gandharan Buddhist text. From Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia, the Gandharan Buddhist texts are the oldest Buddhist manuscripts yet discovered. Dating from about the 1st century BCE to the 3rd century CE, and found in the northwestern outskirts of the Indian subcontinent, they represent the literature of Gandharan Buddhists from present-day northwestern Pakistan and eastern Afghanistan, and are written in Gandhari. They were sold to European and Japanese institutions and individuals and are currently being recovered and studied by several universities. The Gandharan texts are in a considerably deteriorated form. Their survival alone is extraordinary, but educated guesses about reconstruction have been possible in several cases using both modern preservation techniques and more traditional textual scholarship, comparing previously known Pali and Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit versions of the texts. Other Gandharan Buddhist texts, several and perhaps many, have been found over the last 2 centuries but lost or destroyed. The texts are attributed to the Dharmaguptaka sect by Richard Salomon, the leading scholar in the field, and the British Library scrolls represent a random but reasonably represented fraction of what was probably a much larger set of texts preserved in the library of a monastery of the Dharmaguptaka sect in Nagarahara. Interesting, huh? So all of that is to explore. This is, the last 2 centuries. It's pretty recent discoveries of these ancient texts, and the fact that they're even salvageable to the degree that they are is really amazing. So again, they're not sponsored or anything, but this is one of the books that I've read on the topic of the Gandhara region, and really recommended just to round out your understanding of the history of Buddhism, if you're into that sort of thing. Otherwise, it's really just an aside and a colorful reminder of the efforts in these 3,000 years of maintaining the scholarship of Shakyamuni's teachings. Now, this next section is not that long, a couple pages dedicated to Gohonzon, what it means to us, Nichiren practitioners, and some corrections on the bad translations of what the Gohonzon is and is not. But we'll leave that to the next iteration of this Buddhism reference. In the meantime, please savor your practice, right? Take care of your health. Your support is critical and much appreciated in whatever form you offer it. All the links in the description give you ample ways, I think, to help. Even just liking and subscribing is an act of propagation, really. You're bodhisattvas. Thank you for that. And as I said, take care of your health, and I'll see you in the next one. Okay. Bye for now.